Hey, hey, J Lo and Electra. I haven't seen either of you in a long time. It's so nice to have you here. Oh, I got to take the little hand off of the kind. That song was entitled "The Cocker Falls" by my baby. Every time I hear his music, I just swoon, y'all. It's fucking brilliant. I first want to, do all the housekeeping stuff. This is for entertainment purposes only. The opinions held, the things that come out of my mouth, I stand on. They are not necessarily or even the opinion sometimes of my guests. So don't hold it against them. If something should slip out and they have that panicked look on their face tonight, my cousin, my friend, my sister, my my friend. Oh, I can't get emotional because y'all, I got two new eyes. I got cataract surgery to repair astigmatism and to, of course, take the cataracts out. I had no idea how fuzzy my world was. So I'm getting used to seeing sharply and clearly at a distance. However, I had to sacrifice my nearsightedness because I didn't ever need glasses to read or anything. It was only to see things at a distance. So I am getting used to that. And I want to thank Dr. Hayes and the entire Wolfson Clinic located at 800 Mount Vernon Highway in Atlanta, Sandy Springs, 30327. The care and the professionalism was just lovely. Um, if I'd had about 20 grand, I could have gotten the lens that makes you really like have really bionic. You have all the visions, child. You have all of it. Yeah. So anyway, I'm satisfied. I'm very happy. Once again, uh, yeah, the opinions expressed by me are mine and mine alone, unless my guest wants to agree. This woman is, well, we're going to be talking about the Witness Stones project. And I'm going to be reading from some slides that I have on my phone. And also talking with her about this project, how it came to be, how she became involved in it, what we hope will happen with this project, because it's absolutely wonderful. And I had written down the statement that she made about how her journey, I don't know what notepad it's on, about how her journey, her introduction to this project, and her journey to connect to find the histories of her mother and her father, and then them collectively from 17, I think it's 1787. Let me see. I think she says that it's from 1787, Pat, because I can't see. Well, I'm going to bring her up because I can't see the title when I'm on this page, but y'all read the title. Anyway, thank you for coming over. It's absolutely brilliant, and it has put a fire underneath me because now I want to connect my mother's family, whom I know very little about, and my father's family, and that even in what I know about them, I've realized I know very little about them as well. So that's it. So I'm going to bring Pat up, and I first and introduce her, and I want her to tell um, to she can introduce herself. and then we'll get right into the topic. And if in case I forgot to mention it again, that was the music was a Cocker Falls by Kimo Cornwell on his CD Hawaii State of Mind. I tell you, just every one of those songs not only reminds me of how much I miss living there and makes me excited about returning. There's something very special about those islands. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to bring up Pat Wilson Phineas. If I talk too much about her, I might cry. Hey, Pat.
Hi, Dee. How are you?
So she calls me D because she's known me for 1,000 years. And she's the only one. I mean, there's a handful of people that can call me by my nickname. So yeah, okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, not at all. Because I've had friends who know me as well. When they come back here to gig, they say, "What? You changed your name?" They still call me D. Pat, I want you to first introduce yourself. I know
sure.
that you have an MSW, a Juris Doctorate in law.
Yeah.
You've held
a lot of things.
Huh?
I was going to say, yes, we got a lot of that stuff, but we needn't waste our time with that.
Well, I want my people to know who you are. Hi, Carter Mancy. Mesquite, I want them to know who you are because
okay.
Listen, I'm proud of the Black women that I know personally, as well as the firebrands that we have in the Senate, the Congress, all around, in all disciplines of life, and just really kicking ass. So,
well, I don't know that I'm one of those people, but I am. I'm Pat Wilson Phineas. I'm. What else can I say? I'm retired at this point, but I have been in my span of time an attorney, a social services commissioner. I was in Denver actually as the head of human services for several years, and I was most recently the House of Representatives, uh, or the Democrat who won the seat for the House of Representatives in 2018 to 2020, representing my home district. But more significantly, it was while I was getting ready or in the process of running for this race that I got a very important phone call, which relates directly to what Dee was trying to talk about in terms of what that we're talking about, I think, this evening.
And you know what? That's such a smooth segue. You're so good.
And that was this call came about quite unexpectedly. I was sitting on my back porch and minding my business, and my husband came out a bit concerned because he's a bit more skeptical than I. And he said, "There's a man on the phone that he wants to talk to you, but he just seems to know a lot about you." And I was like, "Well, okay, let's see what this is about." So I talked to this gentleman. His name was Dennis Colladin. And at the time, he was a middle school teacher in Guilford, Connecticut. And as a hobby, for some number of years, he had been researching enslaved people that he had come upon in Guilford. Well, he hadn't come upon enslaved people. He had come upon records that referenced enslaved people in his town of Guilford. And he had been surprised because he didn't know, like most others, didn't know that there was slavery in the North. And so he began recognizing the contributions that these people had made to the community, and yet there was no record of them. So anyway, had been doing this research sort of on his own for a while, but he was at the time a teacher at the Adams Middle School in Guilford. And he was working with his students and helping them, because he was a history teacher, understand some of what he was doing. And he basically unearthed the story or the paperwork related to two 17-year-olds that were brought to Boston from somewhere in the Caribbean. One of them had apparently come more recently from Africa to the Caribbean. He was only there a few weeks before he was brought to Boston. The girl may have been in the Caribbean a little bit longer, but nonetheless, they were both 17. They
Mhm.
were imported to Boston. Um, and I didn't know, I'll go back into that later. I didn't know what
Yeah.
imported meant. I
And
didn't
yeah,
know what does that
exactly.
mean? You didn't come out
We
and say
didn't
kids
know.
to somebody else or what? And
Right.
what it actually, very quickly, what it meant was that I guess this merchant that ordered these people, it was almost like he sort of must have said, well, I need two 17-year-old, a girl and a boy, because when they were at a place called Hugh Hall's, who was a major merchant in Boston, and that's where he picked up these two. So whether he put it in order for them or where they got, but many ships
Mhm.
came to Hugh Hall's, and on the manifest of this one was a boy, a black boy and black girl, or Negro boy and Negro girl, for this merchant, Naughty. So anyway, he took these two 17-year-olds back to his wife. They were a childless couple that lived in Guilford. And
Oh.
over the next 25 years, this couple had 8 children. They didn't have the children right away. They didn't have them for about 3 years, and then they
Hmm.
started having children.
You mean
But
3 years after?
after they went to the Naughty's house and they were
Okay.
17, in other words, Phyllis, who was the 17-year-old girl, didn't start having children until she was about 20, almost 21, but she got there when she was 17.
Hmm.
At some point, she and Montrose, who was the boy, became the parents of 8 children. Two of whom died in not early childhood, but one was like a couple of months old, and the other was 2 years old. Um,
Hmm.
and they had an interesting habit of naming, not interesting, but if a child died, they made the name the next child after him. So
Hmm.
Caesar one lived a couple of months. A couple of years later, they had another child that died shortly after, and they named him Caesar also. But I mean, they named him Caesar before he died. And
Uh-huh.
then when that was what the 2 children they lost, the other 6 children grew to adulthood. Um, Most of them, or well, let me see, I don't want the story to get too confused, but what happened was the merchant, who was named, of all things, Naughty,
Right.
Nahtie,
Right.
a Scottish merchant. um, he gave these, 10 years after he took these people in, or enslaved them.
Enslave them is
Yeah,
what he
right.
did.
He left a will, and he said that he was leaving them 4 acres of land, which was attached to his farm, and an annuity for each of them, and he would free Montrose and all of his children
Hmm.
on his death, and upon his wife's death. So he died 10 years, and his will would have taken effect, but his wife didn't die till 30 years later. So these people who had been promised their freedom, the Montrose, Phyllis, and their 8 children, um, were held in indentured service for
Hmm.
another generation or so. But out of this entire group of 8 children, they had 2 daughters and only one grandchild. That grandchild is like the sire of everybody that came in my father's line, because it was just one of them. So his name was Caesar. Like I said, the other 2 Caesars died. I think I would have stopped naming my children
I
Caesar.
think so too. It might.
Nonetheless, this one made it. And so Caesar the third died, uh, you know, in the household that his mother was in. I mean, he lived in the household that his mother was indentured into.
Hmm.
So although she died very early, like at age 26, he lived on and became eventually the parent of children. And so what happened on this particular day when this middle school teacher called me was he handed me all of this information. He had been researching this enslaved couple, and he had gone through the generations until he came across the obituary of my father, who was a Tuskegee Airman. And
Yes.
at the time,
Word
there
trauma.
was a lot of, stuff in the papers at the time Daddy died, which is in '02. And
Yes.
so Dennis, now in '17, finds this obituary from '02 and realizes over a series of, well, the first obituary he found, they didn't mention a
Was
family.
your mother?
My mother was dead by then.
I
By the
know she
time
was.
Daddy
I
died. Yeah, she
remember
died
that.
in '87, and Daddy died in '02, so he was
Right.
quite a
I
while after
remember
he
that, but I was just trying to never mind. I thought maybe they found some evidence of your mother, but you say this was
No,
directly
that's another whole story. This
okay.
was all of this has to do with my father's side.
Yeah,
So
okay.
so anyway, I was essentially handed by this middle school teacher, Dennis Culloden, something like 6 generations of family that I knew nothing about.
Wow.
And so and Dennis subsequently um, founded a 501c3 program called the Witness Stoves program. So the research he did that uncovered my family became kind of a center stone. But
Uh-huh.
the program has now worked with more than, we've covered more, I don't know, we're now in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, and performing the same. It's an educational
Hmm.
program. What it is that we work with, first of all, we need to be invited in. We don't like go, we're going to find an
And
enslaved
so
person for
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
It's those communities that are looking to to honor, formerly enslaved people. Our mission is to restore the history and honor the humanity of enslaved individuals who helped to build our communities. And so that's been happening all over Connecticut.
And
We
that's really interesting to me because whenever anybody speaks about slavery, they never speak about slaves that came through in the North because it was assumed
Right.
that everyone that left the South and if they made it North, were free
Yeah,
people.
but that's what I believe too. That's what I also was taught in school.
Yeah, right.
So what happens at this point when you have somebody like Dennis Culloden, and the fact that this now has developed into a curriculum, so that our program looks at slavery through like a 5-pronged lens. The treatment,
Mm-hmm.
the agency and resistance, the economic perspectives on slavery,
Mm-hmm.
the I'm trying to think of of course I can't now sit here and remember the 5, but I'll come up with it. But the 5, essentially what we call the lens of slavery. And
Right.
so children, what I love about the program is that, first of all, like I said, we're invited in. It's either somebody like a school teacher who wants to run the program, or somebody from the local
Mm-hmm.
library, somebody from the first selectman's office, or somebody who's interested in doing this. And we work with all of those people to identify the enslaved in their community. And then we work with children to, the children are actually using these primary documents. It's not about interpretation. It's about, you're seeing a slave ship manifest. You're
Right.
seeing an
Right.
inventory. You are seeing
Mm-hmm.
various things. And
Mm-hmm.
we're uncovering stories that haven't been told. And many of these stories, it's not just about somebody being enslaved. It's these people fought in the Revolutionary War. I mean, most people don't know, for example, that 5,000, more than 5,000, around 5,000 Black men
Mm-hmm.
fought um, for the colonies in the Revolutionary War.
Wow.
Another 5,000 fought for the crown, being promised
Yeah,
their
we heard about one or two that fought in the
right,
Revolutionary War.
but not 10,000. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that's being uncovered, in the fact that not virtually every colony had slavery.
Mm-hmm.
So this was not something that just happened in Virginia and down south. This was every single
Every
Connecticut,
single of the
and
13.
Massachusetts, Rhode Island, all
Mm-hmm.
of these
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
had slavery. I think Rhode Island, I believe, got rid of theirs first, but all of these had slavery. Now in Connecticut, that slavery ended much earlier than it did in other places. There was something they called gradual emancipation around 1787, I believe.
Right, gradual
Yeah. Well,
emancipation.
yeah. What they, in other words, they had a scheme, not a scheme,
As far
but
back as 1787, though.
yeah. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
should check my, I don't exactly have my dates in front of me, but it was, it would have been around 17, the late 1700s and early 1800s,
Yeah.
but way
Okay.
before 1865. It was like at
Right.
least
That's what
50
I was
years
thinking.
before then.
Like, okay.
And what it said is that some people, if you were born after a certain date, then like they had a specific date. If you were born after that date, then when you turned 25, you were free.
You were free.
If
Okay.
you were born before that date, you weren't. So
Wow.
obviously that was a problem for. So
Yeah.
that scheme lasted about 7 or 8 years, and then they changed it and freed everybody. Or what they did was they set it up so that if a master didn't want to have to take care of his elderly slave in old age,
Mm-hmm.
and that person was now over the age of 25 and in good health, they could go down to the town hall and get them freed. But they would have to, that way, and a lot of people did that. A lot of the slavery in Connecticut ended because it was essentially a tax
Well, actually,
uh,
it sounds.
scheme. I
Well,
mean,
we'll get into that. It sounds far more civilized, if you will, than
well,
down
it
south.
was, and also there were more examples, I think, of
Civilized is
people
just for lack
like
of a
my
better word.
family where there was, there's this kind of mythology about, slavery in the North wasn't hard. Look, slavery was slavery.
That's,
You were owned by somebody and you did what somebody said. But it is
right.
true that living in the house of a minister, you know what I'm saying, and being
Mm-hmm.
enslaved in that house and living there is not the same as living in a field in the middle of the South somewhere in a shack. So
Right.
there were differences in the, you were still owned, but you might have a better chance of getting educated. You
Right.
might have a better chance at, well, like in my family's case, even though there was a period of indenture when they should have been set free but weren't because Mrs. Naughty hadn't died yet, they were all within about 4 blocks of each other. And in the indenture, she kind of rented them out to her friends and neighbors. And basically, there was a clause about their treatment. There was a clause that said they had to be fed meat along with, with food included meat. It said that they could not be sold, that they could not be mistreated, that there were all kinds of provisions that essentially sheltered them in some way. And while I'm not trying
Right.
to make it sound like slavery was good,
No.
I
No.
also have to recognize that being left land and property was not what happened to most of us, And so even though it was a little piece of land, Montrose and Phyllis, when Phyllis unfortunately died before Montrose, and actually she died a few months before Mrs. Naughty, so she never got to see freedom.
Right.
But
Right.
Montrose got his land, got his little house, got everything he'd been promised, and his children, although they were indentured, they were allowed to come and go from the house and visit and whatnot. And they were all, all of the children were memorialized by these Connecticut families. Like I have, stories of like old Guilford or, Harriet Beecher Stowe's father.
Right.
In his autobiography, it memorializes one of my relatives. So,
Wow.
because he was
How
enslaved by Harriet Beecher Stowe's father, right? He probably was.
Right.
He may have been
That's why his name
the
was
model
there.
Uncle Tom or something. I don't know. You know how it goes. But the fact of the matter is that's the fact of the matter. I mean, he was in, and so there's reference to him. There are reference to some of my other uncles in various parts of old Connecticut history. So it's been a very rich experience in finding this documentable material and building a story from it, building a curriculum, and then being able to so I can now tell the story of 11 generations of my family from 1727 to now.
That's wonderful. And before we go any further, I want to put Edwina Stevens' comment up. She says this journey of discovery has lots of twists and turns. I found my grandmother living on St. Nick's in New York. Husband stealing. I'm not quite sure I understand that, but it sounds like
Well,
granddaddy was an entrepreneur, much like the ones we have today.
well, the
But I,
fact of the matter is, you never know. That's why, going back in ancestry is such both fun and such excitement, because you really never know what you're going to find. But the fact of the matter is, everybody has a history.
yes,
Everybody has an ancestor. You might not know who they are. You might not want to know who they are, but you can't say none of us just got here.
right.
We all came from somewhere, and I don't care if you're black, white, yellow, red, brown. All of us have our own history, and all of us made America.
Right.
And the point of the Witness Stones program is really about uncovering that heritage. We also look at Native American, because many
The
of
first
them in
Americans,
the early
really.
days, right, where some of them were enslaved as well. Although they were enslaved, it was different than it was for blacks, because if you were a black and enslaved in Connecticut, your children, and you were a woman, your children were also enslaved. If you were Native American and enslaved, your children weren't enslaved. So
Okay.
it was a huge difference in the treatment because it was assumed that Native Americans belonged, if you will, to the crown or England. Whereas,
How did that? I gotta wonder, how did that happen? Because they were already here.
well, it happened because. I mean, I don't want to.
Well, I guess I know
what
how
I'm saying. It happened because the people just overed their history,
yes,
annihilated them, and just said, "You belong
well,
to me."
I didn't mean that to be.
The Indian Wars is when they annihilated large numbers of these, and they took the ones. It's kind of funny. Not really funny, but they took the ones they can. Mostly, they took women and put them in the houses to serve or do whatever. They found out they couldn't manage Native American men because I guess they knew the woods too well. They were not inclined to be slaves.
That's right.
So what happened is they ended up shipping them off to the Caribbean to work in the sugar fields and other places where the conditions were really far worse, and where many of them died or were killed. But they couldn't seem to they couldn't manage them on plantations, and they couldn't manage
I totally get it.
Sleeping in, in the housing, so it wasn't working out in quite the same way. And I don't mean to make light of it in any way, because I'm not. I'm sounding like I'm making fun of it, and I'm not.
No, you are not.
I'm just saying that
you absolutely are not. I guess I didn't ask that question. It was satirical or something, because I know exactly how that happened. It happened the way it always happened whenever there were, quote, white explorers, end quote, who would find some land and not see anyone.
Well, and that's why I call it, like Gil Scott Heron did, his story.
His story. And before we go any further, also, I'd like to read something that I wrote down, and I think this is at the beginning of on the website of the Witness Stones. Are you calling it a program? Because I'm calling it a project.
It's a Witness Stones project. It is a program, but we call it.
And well, this is what I love, and then this is also what frightens white people, or far right white people, because not all. I gotta say that.
No, truly, because most of the people in these programs are white. Understand that.
Frightens far the people who are screaming about CRT, which both you and I know is taught in postgraduate law schools, and not all.
No, I never took it. I mean, I went to law school, and I never had any. I never heard of CRT.
And that's the part that really infuriates me, because the folks screaming about it know that it's not taught in school. But these stories are the stories that frighten them the most, and the reason they frighten them the most is because we are writing our stories. We are not any longer satisfied with being a paragraph within a history book that says, and there was slavery, and then Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, and all
Mhm.
the people in the Confederacy were these gentile Southern men who surrendered, as gentlemen, just the nonsense that we were not taught. These kinds of projects are our stories being told by us, and
Yes,
it's
but
frightening.
absolutely. It's frightening only to the ignorant, because the people that we've been dealing up with here, like I said, this program is getting larger and larger and larger. And frankly, most of the students up here that we've worked with are white.
Yeah,
Most of the programs that are looking for this information, all these towns up here are largely white. There's not a
yeah,
single,
I know.
you know. So,
I
and it's
know.
like, and
I
they're
know.
seeking this information. But I certainly understand what you're saying about some people, and especially those who are espousing CRT nonsense.
Right,
But the
and
reason
screaming the
that I
loudest.
don't really have to worry about this is because the reason that I really don't worry about this is because we're dealing with fact. We're not
Right.
dealing with opinion. We're not dealing with somebody ought to feel bad or wants to be. No, we're
Right.
just
Well,
dealing
that's
with
why I wanted to
things that you
read
can show.
this
Yeah.
open, because I just loved it. And it says, and it begins with, it can be hard to talk about hard history. And these are some of the reasons. There are 5 bullet points that describe the reasons that it becomes difficult to talk about slavery, which is American history. It's not the pretty part. Not much is, but it is American history. And the first one was, it happened a long time ago. We, in quotes, and had nothing to do with it. I inserted the we. We are not responsible and don't want to uh, be responsible, and I put in my own part, or feel responsible.
Mhm.
Secondly, nostalgia feels better than fact. The past can be painful to remember. Thirdly, we don't see history's relevance to quote now, end quote, or to the future. 4, new perspectives might unsettle old beliefs, and change is uncomfortable, and I might add, traumatic.
Mhm.
And 5, reconciling the past might mean accepting responsibility for the future. Does what happened 3 years ago impact your students? And I'm thinking this is what, since you're mentioning students, this has to do with you being invited into schools
Well,
to.
not just schools, but invited into communities, because sometimes it's in the school, sometimes it's in the church, sometimes it's in the historical society,
Mhm.
but often the curriculum is being done in schools. And so often what happens is the children, and these can be anywhere from fourth graders through 12th graders. But the kids and young people, they study this stuff, then they do an individual project based on what they've learned. They look at
Mhm.
the individual documents that relate to their town, and the kinds of things they've done. They've written poetry, some of them have written reports, but most of them have written poetry. The other day at one of the installations, I saw someone compose music. But the kids get
Wow.
incredibly creative. They music, poetry, and it
Mhm.
really shows how enriched they have become, because the whole CRT thing is kids are going to be made to feel guilty, or somebody's going to feel bad.
Well,
That's
that
not what
isn't
we're
even the
seeing.
purpose of it.
Well, of
Anyone who
course it
knows,
isn't, but it's just,
but that again, to me, just lends itself to the rhetoric
it's just white
that's
fragility.
that's
So
out
it's not,
there, and
it's
I'm
like,
just I
I
can
don't spend a
kind
lot
of,
of time worrying about it,
yeah, I
because
can kind of get it, but I don't get it anymore.
well, I
Now,
mean, the problem with all of this is, including the way it impacts us today, is basic racism, and the fact that from slavery we weren't seen as equal human beings, or human beings at all. The dehumanizing of
so
black
we
people
had
in
nothing
this.
to do with the draft. So because of that, we had nothing to do with the construction of the drafting of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the laws that were put into place, since we weren't considered human,
Right.
we didn't have anything
That's how
to
all men can be
do with it.
created equal,
Right.
because you weren't considered a
And
man
so what
in
I
the first
say to
place,
people
so it doesn't apply
sometimes
to
is
you.
that the law is doing exactly
What it was
what it
intended
was
to do.
constructed to do.
That is the
And
truth.
it didn't have us in mind when it was being,
No, it did. It
when
didn't
there
have
was
women in mind either,
no
frankly.
women at all. And
You
so,
know, so it was white land owning men. That's who it was written for. And I emphasize not just white men, white land owning men. That was
right,
who it was written for initially. But
exactly.
but nonetheless, um, since the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, when we were declared to be full citizens of the country, it has obviously applied
Not
to
quite.
us so it can be used to defend us,
That's
even though
right.
we all know that you ain't nothing but a piece of paper.
That's
You know
right.
what I'm saying, on some level, which is why we need to be concerned about what's going on around us now.
Right, exactly. So I'm going to continue with, what does it mean to be enslaved? And this, I guess, is a subtitle: Education Without Me, His Story.
Yeah.
Intentionally colorblind, lack context, lost history, repetitive and negative implications, diminished personal esteem, and created discomfort. Um, and history, real history finally included me.
Mm-hmm.
So you said it answered unanswered questions, it provided perspective,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledged and respected contribution, engendered ownership in America, belonging, self respect, enhanced the commitment to share and learn others' history.
It did all those things because having been raised up here in Connecticut and having heard all that nonsense that you were talking about earlier, how Lincoln freed this freedom.
Yeah,
Yeah, sure, we heard about
exactly.
that. But honest to God, when they taught, I thought the man ran out in the crowd and got shot by accident. There was no context to suggest that he was one of the organizers of the Boston Tea Party, or that he, none of that. Like none of those details were known. And who knew?
Right.
Not only did not know that there was no slavery in the North, I certainly didn't know that my fifth great grandfather fought in the American Revolution. I certainly didn't know, any of the things that I learned, like all of the things that I learned about my family, or all of it had happened before the Civil War, and it was like I didn't think anything happened until the Civil War.
Well, let me tell you when I was in high school, I really loved to join. I was curious, so I wanted to join all the clubs.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually, through my high school English teacher, wanted to submit an application to join the Daughters of the American Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for all I know, I might have relatives who fought in the Revolutionary War.
They sent me an application recently.
I found out that the only way that I could be a member is if I was white.
Well, that's not true anymore.
Well,
that
maybe
may
not
have
anymore,
been,
but it sure was then.
well, that's because they assumed that no black people fought in the
Exactly.
Revolutionary War, but when now it is known that more than 10,000 did, and they are actually recruiting black people who can trace their ancestry. So that has changed, but the Daughters of the American Revolution are the ones that had, were Marian Anderson. Remember when she had to sing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial? Was because the Daughters of the American Revolution wouldn't let them into
Right, exactly.
So it's like, yeah, they've had a checkered, and I'm still not saying that there aren't people who don't want to acknowledge it, but the fact of the matter is the records are available, and you can find 5,000 black men, fought in the, from the colonies, no doubt more.
Now, what also has sparked my curiosity is that when I first moved to Atlanta, a dear friend, this is when, I don't know how many of you in the chat thank you, all six of you. We usually get about 10 or 20, but thank you for the six that are
Mhm.
here because this is a wonderful topic. And I hope that you will like and share and subscribe. Um, when there were phone books, and he was trying to contact me, and he said, "Hey, did you know there's a whole bunch of y'all down here?" I said,
That's funny.
"No, I had no idea." And I kind of forgot about it. I mean, from time to time, I would get a phone call from someone looking for a James Harnage, or
Mhm.
something. And then when my father passed, a woman by the name of Judith Harnage reached out, and I'm thinking, I don't know any damn Judith. And I'm racking my brain trying to figure out who this person could be. And she's actually a woman who lives in Destin, Florida. And she was sort of the chronicler of the family name,
Mhm. Mhm.
generations deep. And she reached out to me and sent me uh, the family tree as she knows it.
That's
Uh,
great.
yeah, also a slave narrative, which pissed me off. But apparently, the woman, Otel Harnage, thought that the Harnage was a good master, whatever that meant. The name, I searched the name. I've found uh, gravestones with Arnage in Shropshire, England. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, I don't know if anybody remembers Captain Planet, but one of the cartoonists and writers for that show was Phil Harnage. So I reached out to him, and he also sent me just a great deal of information because he said he tries to find out if Harnage is anywhere wherever he travels. So there are headstones, gravestones there. There was a bed and breakfast called the House of Harnage. I actually found a coat of arms, no, not a coat of arms, a family crest.
Mhm.
And so now, Judith told me that at one time, uh, my slave master's name was very prominent within the politics of this state, that they were actually some of the first uh, governors and leaders of the state when
During Reconstruction?
during when Thomasville was the capital of Georgia, and I didn't ever know know that to be true. I've always
Well,
thought,
there was a period in time in the early part of Reconstruction, in the 10 or 15 years after the end of the Civil War, when Black people really were thriving because they were in politics, they were running
mhm,
businesses, they were doing all kinds of things, and then that's when the Ku Klux Klan became the repression of the KKK, and the burning of businesses and
just
all that kind of stuff
businesses,
started
whole
happening,
communities, people. It
which is
didn't
what always happens
just
as soon as
happen
you
in
start moving
Tulsa.
ahead,
No,
right? And that's what happened, and the whole burning of Black Wall Street and all of that kind of stuff happened
mhm.
in the early
During
the
Reconstruction. Now,
yeah,
in
well,
the
after
South,
and the period after, because after Reconstruction came serious Jim Crow, because
absolutely.
the whole idea was, you don't want if we put photos and images out there making these people look like monkeys and idiots,
Right.
and that was all this minstrel and all that was coming at the same
And
time.
that
Would you
we would make
would you
them
want
mad
something like that to
killers.
vote?
Yeah.
Would you, right? No, though, but it was like a way of convincing white people who might have been inclined to think about it, that you don't want these monkeys to vote. You don't want these, and that's what all of the those Jim Crow characterizations of ignorant Black men, and big lip people, just the whole Jim Crow. I mean, if you don't know, Google Jim Crow images,
Right. You'll
and
know
some horrible
exactly what
things
it
will come
is.
up. You
And
know,
Edwina's made another statement. She said, I went looking for my father's family, and it led me, I'm assuming, to a plantation. And is that Bermuda or Barbados owned by a Episcopal priest
Mm-hmm.
from the UK named Haywood.
Mm-hmm.
I know some Haywoods, to Charleston, South Carolina, and Edisto Island to Tortola.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
well, a lot of priests were involved in a lot of,
absolutely,
particularly
yeah,
up here, a
because
lot of churches and priests were
the
involved
Catholic
in
Church
slavery.
sanctioned that because they had said that we didn't have souls.
Right,
So we were just we would be considered a primate. It was
right,
okay to abuse us. It was okay to rape us, to kill us, because we weren't people. So I'm not surprised that priests from Roman. I know the Roman Catholic Church uh, wrote that about slavery. That about the because I guess
right. But
somebody had a conscience and wanted to say, well, aren't we going to go to hell because we're killing these people? And they said no.
well, they actually had it both ways, because not only was that their attitude about Christianity, they also passed laws that saying, well, even if you're baptized, you can still be a slave. So they played it they
Right.
played it both ways. So yes, and it's really interesting. The other thing I find very interesting about this stuff didn't start in 1619. Like I said, 1619.
Yeah, and I have to give a
This
shout out
started
to
in
Hannah Nicole Jones.
1492. That's when Black people first came to the Americas.
1492.
1494, actually, 1494, with Columbus. Columbus went to Hispaniola, and a free Black man went with him on that trip. So when they start, and then there's so much history before the 1700s that shaped the way slavery was in America, and shaped it sort of was like the stair steps to get to the slavery that we had. They did
Mhm.
things like the Spanish queen said, "Oh, okay, well, we can have slaves in the Americas." So that was like in the
Yeah, I guess that was
1500s.
after they thought when they asses sailed off that
Yeah,
they
that
would
was
just
like
go over the edge of the earth and never return.
this was early in the 1500s,
Yeah.
1600s. Another early thing that happened was actually there's like so much stuff. I can't even stress like all of the things like the laws against Black people gathering in groups of more than three, and all of the things that foretold what was going to later happen with slave laws, or with things of that.
Now, Jakarta
Um,
says no such thing, but Native people were led to believe that many Black people took white folks' names when those names already belonged to the Native Black people who are already here. Now, I know that to be true. I don't
yeah,
know if it's
yeah,
true in the case of my last name, however,
hmm,
because there's just too much history
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Now, I want to get back. I want to read the last thing from that page, Pat,
Hmm.
which I thought was the most beautiful way to sum up all of this and how your life was impacted or by finding all of this history from a complete stranger.
Hmm.
And you said, and the title was, and just a thumbnail, I think,
Hmm.
how history uncovered the lost origins of an American family, 1727 to 2022. How history, quote, found me, end quote, and what I learned about my family, and what I learned about my family. I think I left out a word or two, and I get and talking about the journey, how
Hmm.
your journey began. Um, for
Yeah,
those,
it did, because you don't know what you're not missing. It's hard to miss something that you didn't know. If you never had
exactly,
it, you don't
yeah,
miss it. And so that was the way it was for history. I mean, I knew my fathers and my uncles and my grandfather and even my great grandfather, and they all had great stories, and I was very proud of them. But I knew nothing after my great grandfather, and I just
mm-hmm.
assumed, like everybody else, well, I must have been slaves, and I guess in 1865 they got free. And but what I could never figure out was how in 1865, if that's when they got freed, how they got to college in by 1870. Because
Mm-hmm.
in my family, my, not just my great grandfather, but my, going back further, there was education in the family. And I could never understand, well, how do you be a slave in 4 years later, you're in Hampton, in the first or second graduating class
Right.
and moving forward. And it was because they weren't, they've been freed for 50 years. Not that it wasn't, that this wasn't a hard road or anything to get there, but I'm just saying it wasn't like it was 4 or 5 years. If you figure 1863 was when everything started, and you see somebody in college by 1869, then it seems like, wow, that was fast. But really, it wasn't that at all. This was years of struggle and striving to the point. But that education has been one of the factors that I think allowed my family to, thrive and survive all these years.
Yes, I am going to have to go to my Gmail account and open up the drive again, because when I was opening up the shared information that you gave me, shoot, just bear with me here. It's amazing how you can get bumblebee right in the middle of something. But I have to pull up the Google Drive, actual Drive document, because I had a few choices.
Yeah, that's always the way it is.
A few choices. I can use Google Slides, which I haven't figured out yet. So I'm just going to pull it up from the Drive. P.W. Coker at Gmail. Because I want to read from some of the slides. Now, she has done a wonderful presentation, complete with slides. I hope that, I really hope that this encourages us to want to know more about our family histories.
Well, I hope people go on Ancestry, because you can, it's,
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
the other thing. How did you now, once you got this information?
well, I can't take credit for very much, because I'm surrounded in this program by people who actually do historical research. So I'm a novice, and I wouldn't even call myself a novice. I'm a lucky recipient. However, I do have a Ancestry account, and when the little leaves come up, I see what's there, and then I check in with Dennis and the gang that are doing the real research. But you can find a tremendous amount of information. If you just have your mother's name and your father's name and your grandparents' names, maybe, you can start from that. And the machine, for lack of a better, the computer will pull things in from sources. They'll say, oh, John Smith had a father named John Smith. Want to check this out and see if it was the same John Smith? And when you do, you think, oh, yeah, that was my grandfather. He lived at X Street, and that's the same guy. It must be him. And in one by one, you build the tree, but you don't really have to do anything except put that initial information in and wait for hints to show up. Little leaves show up on your account. And when you look at those accounts, they give you information you didn't have, and they give you a chance to say, is this your person or not? But, and but usually you can tell if it's your person, because you'll find out, oh, that person has the same name as my two aunts, or something like that. So you start to say, yeah, that could be. You find people you never realized were there. And if your mother's name was Mary, and then you find out there was another Aunt Mary, and there was a grandmother on the other side named Mary, it all starts to come together. So it doesn't, I'm certainly not advertising for Ancestry.com, but I can say it's something like $19 a month. Usually they give you a free month, and you can do a lot in that free month. You can find out a lot of information. But what will probably happen is you'll find out that you want to know more, and that's how they hook you, because you end up staying on longer,
longer than that month. I did.
Well, a couple of years ago, I had been on, and Robert was like, like, we're paired ancestry. We both, and it was like I kind of had forgotten I was on it. But then when I went back, I found like 100 hints, and I was dazed filling in information that I hadn't looked for. And so I wanted, but you do, it can kind of get away from you, because you forget, and then the $19 keeps coming out of your whatever when you
Right.
sign up. But I swear it's worth it.
It happens to
Really.
me.
And you don't have to be, you don't have to forget that you put it on your card. You can stay on top of it and not, not.
Okay, so yeah, because I did many years ago when I used to be, before I began my own personal, what do you call it, boycott of Facebook and Mark
Yeah, I don't do
Z.
Facebook.
I did have someone reach out to me who was my grandfather's, one of his brothers, and I do remember an Uncle Bob. I also remember that my grandfather and his brothers were all very fair skinned with freckles, and they had really kind of coarse, why it wasn't curly, it was straight,
like mixed hair
and coarse.
Yeah,
Just like straight, like there wasn't a curl anywhere to be seen in it, and they were all very fair skinned. So now I want to know more about them, and someone on Facebook reached out. She asked me if I was related to, if Tom was my grandfather, and she said she was the granddaughter of my Uncle Bob. And I did go on the tree for a while. I don't know what eventually happened. I think her mother died, and she just kind of lost, it kind of took a lot out of her, and she didn't do anything more with it. But now, and she's in Texas, and I do know that my father and my grandmother and my grandfather were in Texas. They were in a town called Gladewater. And oddly enough, I met a gentleman who was a conductor and a major musician while I worked he was just this brilliant black man with the space between his two front teeth. And he said he knew about Gladewater because my family, the town was filled with, it was almost like the whole town was made up with people with that last name. And I wondered if he was related because he looked so much like he could be the cousin of my father. Yeah, so you've really like struck my interest. Now you say as a young student, I was reluctant to be associated with that reality. When you say, what does it mean to be enslaved? Experiences in school didn't help. So you were in the North.
Well, I was in the North in an all white town. So the only little dark thing in the whole, third, fourth grade was me. Now, Valerie, my sister, was, 3 or 4 years ahead of me. So I really didn't interact with her. Although she was in grammar school at the same time. You're a sixth grader and a second grader.
Right. They don't want to be bothered.
Right. And so it was kind of like, even though she was there, and I'm sure she had her own experiences, it was just like me and everybody else kind of experiences. And in, even all the way through high school, because of the way they study the Civil War, it's always like once a year you'd have to put up with being the resident slave because everybody in the class, when they would talk about slavery, would turn around and look at you.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're the closest thing they were ever going to see to one.
Right.
And that was traumatic, frankly. And it really made me hate history. It made me, there was nothing of me in history except the Civil War unit where you got some little pickaninny sitting in front of a shack or either working in the cotton field or eating watermelon in the sun or you know what I mean? It was like, that was the caricature. I'm sure you do, because that was what they taught us was happening. So we didn't hear about the inventions that were being made, the things that were being written long before slavery ended by Black people. We didn't know about the inventions. I mean, there are so many inventions by Black people. Do you realize that the sanitary belt was invented by a Black woman? I mean, there's just things that I found. Not only was it invented by a Black woman, it didn't go on the market for 30 years because they found out she was Black. She had a patent.
Yes.
And then they wouldn't produce the thing when they found out she was Black. So women, how many women used sanitary belts until they came up with, something else? Everybody.
Yeah.
So, but that was a black woman's invention. A black woman invented the first home alarm system. I mean, when do you hear these things? You know, I certainly never did. I mean, but there are so many that now I incorporate that into my talks and into my work, because people are always, you know, Black History Month. We talk about Martin Luther King. I'm like, I
Yeah.
mean, I love Martin Luther
Oh,
King.
and
Don't get
Rosa
me wrong,
Parks.
but
Yeah, they
right,
get all the shine.
there's a lot more people
Oh
than
yeah.
that need to be talked about, and it's not a 1 month thing; it's an every damn day thing. Because you can look, and you know, I know my sister Valerie wrote a book, The ABCs of Black Heroes, where she takes the letter A and goes, you know, from B, C, all the way to Z
Mhm.
with somebody that can be celebrated. And it's the same thing with, you know, when you look at the number of inventions and the number, I mean, I just keep thinking about those Jersey barriers, you know, those things you see on the highway that separate lanes that are kind of like of
Yes.
cement. Those are those are a black man's invention, that they call Jersey barriers, that you don't have to, you know, when you're making a road, you can move these things and it kind of creates a road that is there until you know, get the real road there. But
We had a lovely
refrigerator
time.
cars, you know, like for the trains, you know, the reason we can have the ice cream. I mean, not no, we didn't invent ice cream, but what we did, there was a black chef at the White House who learned how to
That's
put
right.
ice cream in boxes and so make it so that it was portable.
Exactly. I
And
remember.
later he invented lots and lots of flavors in his portable ice cream. They call him the father of ice cream, not because he invented it, because obviously it was something that happened in China, I think, many years ago. But it was, you know, there are so many things that is not known about what we did before and after slavery that needs to be celebrated, not just by us, not just to make us feel better, but because all of these little white and brown and yellow children have things that can be celebrated too. And when we are able to celebrate each other's things, we think about each other in better ways. We are not having our children in a position where people assume that the only thing they ever did was work for free and be abused, you know.
Right.
And that's essentially what we're left with by his story, you know.
I am not being rude. It was I was looking for this woman. February 24th, 1864, Rebecca Lee Crumpler becomes first black woman to receive an MD,
Mm-hmm.
and she was in medical college during a time when male physicians claimed that women did not have the physical strength to practice medicine. By 1864, Rebecca Davis, on February 8th, 1831, the pioneer first worked as a nurse in Charleston, Massachusetts, after getting accepted into the New England female, what are two, uh, she didn't finish the thought. She became a graduate, okay. She was the first, became the school's first African American graduate.
Mm-hmm.
There was also something else amazing, that a black woman had the patent on that she's not getting any credit for, and it has to do with something in medicine and something like phenomenal in medicine. Of course, we know on February 19th, 1942, the Tuskegee Airmen blazed their way into history.
Yep.
I mean, there's just so many wonderful things. I'll get back to that. I didn't. The butter churn
Mm-hmm.
was made and received a patent
The folding bed.
1891. Yeah, I mean, just
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's so many things in our lives that we use every single day. I mean, I even think about the electric lights, because we know Edison invented the electric light, but how many people know that it was a black man in his lab that invented the filament
the
that
filament.
made the light
Yes,
work? You know,
right.
you know, or that kind of thing somehow gets lost in the shuffle.
It sure does. I mean, it was only recently, I think within the last maybe 5, 6 years, it was told that the recipe for Jack Daniels bourbon was the recipe that a black slave had put together.
Mhm.
I wonder how, I thought, damn, his family must be
Well,
furious at this point,
well,
because
then some of these things, it's more than furious. Some of these things, there have been legal challenges where people have been
yeah,
able to.
Henrietta
There are a couple of
Lacks,
really good ones going on, like against some of these major universities that have taken images and used them, and
Henrietta
there.
Lacks, the longest DNA strand.
Yep, there are a number of fights going on that
Yeah,
where this stuff is being is at least being acknowledged. But I mean, I'm just happy for the acknowledgement. I'm happy that these. I mean, and I love talking about CRT. I love arguing with those people about CRT. I really do because I'm pugnacious anyway. But I mean,
I know.
I just please attack me about CRT. I really want somebody to do that because it's such
And what I
nonsense.
want you to do is for people. Jaconda says there's very little in this country that hasn't been invented by us. I have
Well,
to
that's
tend to
probably
agree.
true.
Yeah. Um. Oh, gosh, I got off my train of thought, but it'll come back.
Did it relate to CRT?
It did. That's what it was. I want you to give an explanation of just what we've already established is taught as a postgraduate study in some law schools. Give
Well,
my
critical race theory is basically common. In my opinion, it's basically common sense. But what it basically says is that in order to truly understand how certain systems work, you kind of have to take racism into account in
right.
order to be able to understand why things are as they are. So it looks at racism as a structural problem, not this man over here doesn't like me because I'm black and is going to keep me out of a job. It's not the white man. The man doesn't even have to know that I'm black in order to be able to discriminate me because the systems are set up in ways that
protect white men.
But I mean, I could think about so many systems. The adoption system, the foster care system. I remember when I was in child welfare and we were, you couldn't find black.
You froze.
My parents, because they wanted somebody, at least 10 years and had a college degree and you just. I mean, that's not discriminatory. Nobody said we're not looking for black people, but they set up criteria that screened out 80% of them. So that's an example of structural racism. Nobody meant to be racist. Nobody wanted to say we're not trying to find black homes for these little black children. That wasn't intentional, but the way the system was set up, it resulted in disparate outcomes. And that's true in health. That's true in insurance. That's true in banking. It's true in real estate. It's true in the gaps in wealth gaps. It's true in and so what it says, what critical race theory says, is that you need to look at systems critical in the context of history and in the context of what has happened in order to truly understand what their impact is today and what their impact is in existing systems. Now, what Republicans and others have turned that into, I can't even, it hasn't got anything to do with what I just described.
No, not at all.
It has to do with it basically has come out as, is this a way to make white people feel bad about things?
Exactly.
To make children feel guilty about things. No, hell no. It has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with the recognition that, as you, I believe, said earlier, I can't remember if we were on camera or not when we were talking about the fact that the Constitution is set up to do exactly it does exactly what it was set up to do. Which is to essentially give rights to some people, essentially landowning white men, and for things not to be entirely equal for others, like women who weren't mentioned at all, and black people who were deemed to be 3/5 of a man, not for their benefit. You didn't get 3/5 of a vote. Right. They got to count 3/5 of you in order to figure out how many votes they could get. So it was, it didn't have anything to do with any black man getting anything, or even saying they thought it was 3/5 of man. It just figured that, well, we're going to count them, because representation is how many people do you have determines
Right.
how many representatives you get. So are we going to count these? There were points in our history when we outnumbered white people in certain, which is, and so
Which
if you're
it
going to
was
count
scary
those,
then
if
too.
you're not going to count those people, this is the way the white farmers felt. I need
Right.
to count these people because I need representation, and whatever comes for citizens, I want that for my farm. So I'm going to count these people, 3/5 of them anyway, for that purpose. But like after, well, it doesn't exactly follow, but I was going to say after, when Reconstruction came, it's never been about one man, one vote. It's like, okay, now that these people are free, we have to figure out how to act like they're still enslaved, and that's how the sharecropping came up. It wasn't just Jim Crow, but that's also how the 13th Amendment was used to put people in jail, because the 13th Amendment basically says that even though they're black, they still have every right. All men are essentially, I should have the thing in front of me, but all men are to be given equal rights, except when they are incarcerated.
Incarcerated,
And so
exactly.
what happened was that after that was passed, so you had black people who were free, except when they're incarcerated. So what happened? All kinds of things that were not crimes for anybody else were crimes for black people.
Crimes for black
Loitering,
people.
not having a contract for a job a year in advance.
Yeah.
Not having worked outside of your assigned area. Okay, you can't, even though you may be a healer, a self-taught healer, we're not going to let you work as that, because you can only be a maid or
Right.
or something like that. And if you do, it's a crime.
And
So in
Mr.
other words,
Jones said you stole a pig. Well, down here was a peonage system.
right,
So
that, and they
so
criminalized.
you stole a pig, you would have to work until dude said that was paid off, and it was never.
Right. And so in other words, they found various ways to re-enslave black people. And that was essentially the beginning of mass incarceration, and also the beginning of the thing we're seeing now: walking while black, sleeping while black.
Right.
Black people are the only people that can, commit a crime by just being black.
Exactly.
And that is a holdover from some of those, some of the things we're seeing now are things that, are holdovers from, essentially the lost Civil War. They've been trying to get us back in that position ever since. I mean, when I say they, I am not talking about every white person, because I know that that's ridiculous.
Yes.
But there is a core of people who have never accepted our equality, our existence,
At all.
and who would be just as happy if we were either not here or in some manner under their thumb. And that's what voter suppression and all these other things are about. But it's not about being white. It's about wanting to retain power absent democracy. And,
right. And I don't know
you
how.
can ask yourself who's doing that, but
yeah,
that's another question.
I mean, it's kind of like in your face when I think about DeSantis cutting up cutting up the district so egregiously, it pretty much has wiped out any black representation.
Yeah, and that's happening as many places they can make it happen. I call him Death Santis, by the way. But
he is Santis.
And it's like that has happened. That's happened everywhere. And I just, like I said, Democrats, the only thing we can do is vote and ensure, we've got to, everybody talks about the fact that, well, Democrats have the majority, have the Senate and the House. We got it by one, and you got two idiots.
Right.
So you're -1 in our count. And
that's right.
We need to have a majority. I think if we had a majority of 11, we could.
It wouldn't matter.
We could do all of the things that need to be done could be done. But absent that, this as long as Republicans are in charge.
I know the court said that it was illegal for him to do that, but I don't know that any significant moves have been made.
Illegal for who to do what?
Change it before November. Also here, two brilliant women, Lucy McBath
Hmm.
and Carolyn Devereaux, were representing two different districts. Here in Georgia, they gerrymandered the map so that they're running against each other for one district.
Yeah, well, that's what happened to me. I mean, when I can't run in the district that I won because when they changed the voting patterns, Ashford, my town, ended up outside of my old district and in a district where I'd have to run against another Democrat.
Right.
So it's
And,
like that's happened to that's happened to a lot of people. I mean,
and
that's
I'm
not,
just like Sheila Jackson Lee running against Al Green. I mean,
well, that's yeah.
oh,
So I mean, this is not new. These are just new iterations of the same efforts toward white supremacy and black suppression. So I mean, but that like I said, the Witness Stones program doesn't deal so much in those things as it does in factual American history.
right,
And the recognition that all of us have benefited from that history. I mean,
right.
I'm sitting at, I live out a place called Squaw Hollow, what I'm saying?
I know. It's
You know what I'm
beautiful
saying?
out there.
Everybody, black and white, have benefited from the history that has made America America. So I don't, what people don't want to deal with though is, like I said in that earlier piece, is they don't want to deal with the fact that we all own it and it's all of ours to fix,
Yeah.
as a result of that. And that because we all got something from it, we shouldn't feel, it's like people are afraid that somebody's going to say, well, you owe me something,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what, and it's not, that's not what it's about. I mean, what I'm owed is acknowledgement. In
Right.
my opinion, what I'm owed is the recognition that the reason that I, meaning black women or people, are at the bottom of every single chart, is a
Mm-hmm.
recognition that that's not because there's something wrong with me, but because of this structural nature of the discrimination that has adhered to people that look like us since we got here.
Yeah.
And that acknowledgement, that because otherwise, if you don't have the acknowledgement of what has happened in the level of racism and the level, like if you don't accept critical race theory, then the only other answer for why we're at the bottom of every damn chart is because there's something wrong with us. We're
That's right.
stupid. We
That's
don't work
right.
hard enough. We can't save our money. We
Right.
can't. I mean, and that is in fact how the American government has dealt with black people. That's why you have job training programs instead of programs that say everybody who's qualified for a job should be able to get one. In other
Right.
words, they're focusing on the individual and saying, well, he must need training. That's why
Yeah.
he didn't get a job, not someone is systematically discriminating against him, or that if we're ensuring that things are fair. In other words, if you assess the problem to be personal, then your solutions are going to be personal. But the
Right.
problems are structural. That's why they don't want you to talk about CRT. Because with the George Floyd thing, and when they saw thousands and thousands of white people coming out,
Marching
God's
too.
black
Yeah.
people and others recognizing the need for change, that was scary. And when
It
you
sure
add the
was.
demographics to that, and they realize that white people, they're not making enough of them, and if all things stay the same,
So
I'm
yeah,
not
yeah. And
suggesting that anybody's replacing anybody. I'm just suggesting
no,
that they're not making enough babies. Other, people of Asian descent and people of Latin descent are making a lot more children than black people or white
that's
people.
right.
Black
That's
people are
right.
essentially the stable. Mixed race are growing because people are mixing in spite of the desires of the ones who want to maintain a white race. And those people aren't making enough babies, which
Yeah.
is one of the reasons why you see Roe v. Wade going down. Don't
Yes,
think these
yes.
things aren't
And
connected.
like rape and incest don't count. And
Oh, you're right,
ectopic
baby.
pregnancy
Like I'm saying, so
doesn't
it's like
count,
that's what people are not understanding. That I fear that people who are voting Republican do not see they think they're trying to keep me from voting. What is happening is they are trying to change American democracy so that none of us will have voting power.
That's
It's
right.
not about, it's not about black people not getting to vote. It's about all people not getting to vote or not having their democracy count in the manner that it has counted.
But we have been screaming from the rooftops that at some point in time, what we have been denied.
Well, they're about to find out. I mean, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that happened with COVID.
Eventually going to come after other.
Well, but the problem is that
marginalized.
a democracy is not easy to recreate. If we lose this thing, it ain't coming back. That's the problem. This isn't a do something. This is not an easy do-over.
No, it isn't.
And we will lose a precious thing that is only a couple hundred years old and which frankly hasn't worked anywhere else in the world. But at least it is hung in there until now, and we're about to lose it because people
and we know why people want to come here from other countries.
Right.
I get it.
People don't vote. They don't vote for the presidential election, which is, they're not voting in the local elections. Do they realize how these people are taking over school boards and the kinds of things that it takes to run? It's not that. You don't have to be any smarter than anybody else. You don't have to be any richer than anybody else. You just have to have the energy to put your name out there and get people. But you do have to take the risk. I mean, I'm not saying that running for office is it is aggravating in some ways, and you do take a risk. And yes, you are putting yourself out there, but it's not because you're any smarter than anybody else or any better than anybody else. And all you need to do is get people behind you and get people to vote. And these days, with Republicans,
we've seen that.
Voting, well, yeah, that's how I got in. I mean, because I didn't know anything about politics and don't want to know anything about it now. But it's like at the time, that's what needed to happen because we needed to get minimum wage. We needed to get FMLA. We needed to get a bunch of things that we were able to get over the line. Police accountability and social work licensing and a bunch of things that we were able to get over the line in that little bit of time I was there. So
Yeah, it's true that there is nothing new. That I think it's in Ecclesiastes that says there's nothing new under the sun. And what I'm finding about far white, those who think they are supreme Americans, is that they are terrified of learning.
Well, they think like Trump does, like projection. They think because they did that to us that we're going to do that to them. And that is not how we roll.
No,
it's not. I know, but they don't understand that. And so they live in fear of this black plague that is somehow going to come and get to do to them what was done to us.
And that's nothing more than just your guilt because you haven't been doing right. Otherwise, you have nothing to fear. So when we go back to your whirlwind, it says a whirlwind tour of the Rogers Wilson family.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had about 50 slides in that presentation and an hour to do it. So this is why it was a whirlwind. Tour.
You're going to have to come back at some point and we'll get through it because I know that our conversation has kind of gotten off the Witness Stones project, and I don't want anybody to forget about that project. I don't want anyone who is interested in wanting to know more about it. I want to encourage you.
Well, by all means, Google Google Witness Stones project.org and you go right into the website.
Hey, Spirit Knows Tarot. I didn't know you were here. Carter Mansion Mesquite, could you please, are you one of my mods? Could you please put the website for the Witness Stones project? I mean, it's pretty easy to Google and you can go right to their website. And it's a wonderful, it's just a wonderful project. And I am dedicated. I'd really like to see something happen here in Georgia, in Atlanta. I'd really like to see this project come here. So how do I go about inviting you?
Well, usually it's usually like somebody connected to a school,
Okay.
to a church, or to a historical society, or to, to, so it's not, yes, we do need to be invited, but it's not just a person in the community. We're trying to be invited by somebody. We need to run a program in a school, so the school needs to be involved. Then we bring in
My
the
pastor
historian and the
is a school
librarian.
teacher, and I think he would be
Well,
absolutely
like I said, we're now doing
delighted.
this. It started in Connecticut, but we're now in Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and one more I'm not even remembering. Because that's only 4 of the 5. I can't think of where but it's in other words, it's branching
It's
out. That doesn't mean we're
spreading,
all over the
yeah.
entire state. It means that we've got like 1 or 2 projects in Massachusetts and 1 in Rhode Island. But the fact of the matter is, it's growing in schools. Essentially, it costs about, I don't know, maybe somewhere between, it's about $5,000 to
That's not a lot of
do
money.
a school project, and we give people a license for a number of years so that they continue to use the curriculum. And basically, that involves teacher training, helping them develop the information around the
Mm-hmm.
enslaved person they're looking at, the translation of those documents, and setting them up so that the kids can actually tackle them and read them, and then using our curriculum of the 5 lenses of slavery, and essentially the process. But it's we're growing faster than we can
I think he would
ch-
love it, and I
manage.
think there's some brilliant young Black people here in the South. I'm proud to be associated with many of them, and I know that I'm putting your website, Witness Stones
Project.org.
JACT.org. I'm going to put in the chat. I think that it would be brilliant, because I just know there would be many, not just some, but there would be many students who would want to tackle
And I probably
projects
should
there.
have mentioned that witness stones, that name, really derived from the Stoppelstein stones in Germany. These
Okay.
were the stones that were put down for Jews who were disappeared during the Holocaust.
Okay.
And you'll find them all over Germany. The stones were laid where somebody worked, prayed, or slept, or lived.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just a little stone that says basically, this person was here, this person lived, because people just disappeared. Well,
Right.
we took the concept, we got their permission, and we took that concept and applied it to enslaved people, so that we're recognizing that the enslaved people were here. So that Witness Stones project actually results, with the end of all of the work done by the students, it results in the laying of a small stone about 4 inches by 4
Mm-hmm.
inches kind of thing. But it basically gives the name of the enslaved person, the years of their enslavement, and what they did, what they were, whatever there is on their stone, whether they were a seamstress or a farmer or what.
Well, that's actually how people were named. A lot of the early settlers were named by their trades.
Yeah, yeah.
This name harnage means literally to harness. So
Hmm.
I'm thinking they made harnesses and bridles and stuff
Probably
for
so.
horses, Yeah.
And of course, so many of us were named. We either sometimes took names of the people we lived with, or in other instances they would call us, like, your last name would be Negro, Theophilus Negro, or something like that. And so our names are like, you have to look in the family names, not always at the last names. In fact, even finding enslaved people, you can't look, because they didn't have last names. So usually at the end of church documents, the end of the census documents, you find all these people with no names. There go your slaves.
Right.
So it's like, when you're looking through these historical documents, you also have to know where to look and what to.
Jaconda made an interesting comment when we were talking about blood, the origins of family. You were talking about the journey from the islands to here, and she made an interesting comment. I'm going to put it up.
Mhm.
She's no such thing. I don't know what she's addressing there, but it says,
Yeah, I don't either. We should find out because I mean,
well,
no
but
such
black
thing.
people were led to believe that many black people took white folks' names when those names already belonged to the native black people who are already here. I can't remember.
Well,
She's
I don't know. I
she's
don't know if she's
agreeing with you on something, but I don't remember what it
yeah, and
was.
I'm not sure she may have been referring to the fact that that a lot of names were native names that like Tantapan is a big one up
Mm-hmm.
here that was a native name that ended up with a lot of black people, but many black people did. I mean, in my family, Rogers was Sharper Rogers, who was the like in the second generation was the father of the one grandchild.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but Rogers was a name that he acquired from the person initially who enslaved him. And later on, when Caesar, even though his last name was Roger, he took the name Caesar Hill from the Hill family. And then
Mm-hmm.
later on, he changed it back to Rogers. So it was not at all uncommon for people, census, they might have started. And also, Freedman was another common name. Jack Friedman. I mean, it's like they sometimes, so they did take, sometimes they took white people's names and other times they took, native names. Sometimes they made names up. I mean, I found an
What I
example of
love
all of
about
those,
this
of all of those things.
website too is that you are showing the actual documents of that have the history, the names from the vital records. I mean,
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the whole point of,
property.
why they can't complain about this and call it interpretation, because we're looking at historical, factual documents. Debate the census. Debate the ship manifest that says this man bought these people. It's like these are documents that aren't disputable. I mean, they're not. It's not an interpretation. It is an actual record. And that's what is so unique about what the Witness Stones Project does, because children are taught how to decipher these documents. I mean, we will
That's
translate
great.
because
I
you're
mean, if
translating
Henry
modal
Louis
English.
Gates had, and he's doing a good thing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
just don't hear it being. It's not in schools. It's good on PBS. I think what Witness Stones does is what needs to be done, and that is bring the facts, the curriculum, bring that into schools,
Mm-hmm.
and I
I was
think
going to say the children are amazing. I mean, they do an amazing
are there
job.
specific grades?
Well, the youngest we've done is fourth grade. Most of them
Okay.
are seventh and eighth graders. But it has gone up as far as 10th and 11th graders, advanced placement history classes. But most of them, I would say a sweet spot is probably
Seventh
fifth
and eighth
and sixth
graders.
and seventh grade.
I
Yeah.
am going to introduce you to Damon Bird. We didn't realize how close we were. His father is the reason my uncle has a church in LA. I mean, I remember his father coming to our church, and I kind of remember some of his brothers and some of the people, but I wasn't really close to any of them. But all of these years later, I find out that this brilliant pastor who is teaching the Bible and history in a way that I've never heard it before is actually like a brother to me, so it's
Yeah. Sometimes it's amazing what you find through ancestry and the people that you find yourself connecting to. In our program, one of the teachers, we brought in a black poet, to talk about, because he had done some incredible work, and it turned out he was related ancestrally to one of the teachers in the classroom. That unbeknownst to either of them, and it was really, but it just shows how. And she had no idea, I'm sure, that she had any black
Right.
flag. He had no idea that he was traceable to somebody who, and they were both happy about it. It was a really good
Yeah, I'm
experience.
sure.
It
I'm
could have gone
sure.
either way, I'm sure, but I mean, she was, very proud, and her children, they were all happy to know that they had this connection to a guy named Jamoki. He's a poet. He's wonderful.
Hmm.
But but it was like Liz Lightfoot, and even having a name like Lightfoot would
Right.
suggest to me that she may have had ancestry or some kind of
Tribe,
but she
actually.
just thought of herself, I'm sure, as a white woman with a family. An incredible researcher, an incredible historian, and an
Oh my.
incredible teacher.
Well, the people in the chat absolutely want you to come back and join us. And I would be delighted if you would, and we
Sure,
can
anytime.
go through your family history. We have touched on some of what I'm loving about the conversation is just again, the connection of what was happening in the late 1700s. I had no idea that the slaves were being freed as early, even though there were rules attached.
Right.
That there were Black people, slaves being freed.
And some of the states were earlier than Connecticut. Some of the I mean, I could get that information together, but I believe it's Rhode Island was at least 25 years ahead of Connecticut.
Wow.
Because they were and some of the other states had like they gave Black men the right to vote sooner than Connecticut, and each of the New England states has a different kind of history. But there are some wonderful websites. I'm trying to Black Past is a website that has an incredible array of historical information on virtually everything you could want, and one of their timelines actually shows Black Past. Let me see if I have it. I'm sure it is blackpast.org. Probably try that rather than
we'll try .org first.
Yeah, blackpast.org.
Okay.
www.blackpast.org. And all kinds of stuff.
Why am I doing that? I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, well, check it out.
Yes, I put it in there correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be checking it out.
It's a great website. It has tremendous information. So good. No, I'd be happy to join you anytime to chat.
Oh, absolutely. You'll have to come back. And I also, when you do return, or even within these next few minutes, just discuss. I don't know about you, but for about the past month, I was feeling anxious. I really know that I know how high and how spiritually connected I am, if that makes sense. And it was almost as if, outside of the anxiety and the anticipation of having these surgeries, there was also just this anxiety that something unpleasant was coming. Mm-hmm. And that's when it manifests as buffalo. And then all of this week, I've had that same kind of anxiety and uneasiness. And then we hear yesterday about that shooting. Mm-hmm.
America's sick.
It is. It is.
And what we're seeing, I believe, is evidence of a potential breakdown that I hope that we can avert. I'm not sure we can. I've been terribly depressed
praying that we can.
Because I'm usually a very optimistic person, but it doesn't feel optimistic.
I'm sorry for over talking. I'm sorry. What were you saying?
I was just saying I'm an optimistic person, but I don't feel optimistic.
I don't feel optimistic right now. And I'm talking to all of these young people, brilliant young people, attempting to convince them to get out there, because you are The one thing about the Black Lives Matter movement is that it impacted Black people all around the world.
Mhm.
I was just listening today to a documentary where this far right nationalist view is taking root in in countries all over the
Oh,
world.
it
And this
is.
one had to do with Australia and the Aborigines,
Mhm.
the Aboriginal people who are said to be the oldest culture, if not one of the oldest cultures uh, on the planet. I watched documentaries where the elders talk about they didn't know anything about a white person. They
Mhm.
never seen a white person. And then, of course, with Western influences coming into uh, their land, they began to get all of these sicknesses, just like they did in Hawaii and
Yeah.
other places where people
And
of color
America.
live. The viral diseases they brought began to kill them. And there's a national, they were talking about that same thing, this replacement theory. These white guys, the person that did the killing, I'm not even calling him a shooter, he's a murderer and a killer in Buffalo, patterned his manifesto
Mhm.
after the manifesto by the gentleman who murdered all of those Muslims
Yeah.
in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And this particular sect of the white nationalist group has connections with them.
Mhm.
So the government, of course, is watching them very closely. However, I began to think that this this is so serious. I mean, this is no time. As a people, we have fought for everything we've ever achieved on this soil. And now is not the time to back off. Now is the time
Oh, that is
to
such a
go
critical
in
message.
hard. And
No,
I'm
yeah.
so tired of people saying voting is a waste of time. My vote
Oh,
doesn't count. I said, do you know if
people
your
are so
first of
stupid.
all, use your head. If your vote didn't count,
Would they be
why
trying
are
so
there
hard to
such
stop it?
extreme measures being put in place to
Warnock
stop
wouldn't have
people
been in
voting?
place if people hadn't come out to vote. It was like we would have lost. We would have lost what we're about to lose last year if people
Yes,
hadn't come out to vote. What really kills me the worst is people say, "Well, you got the majority. We gave you the majority. A
we
majority of
have
one
no
is no
majority.
majority. A majority of one means you're subject to sentiment and idiot
That's right.
mansion, and
Mention
and they're selfish, and I don't know what.
greed.
I'm not sure where they're coming
They
from.
are getting too much money. They have their
Yeah,
lining their
probably it
pockets
has to be
from
money.
the
I mean,
Republican lobbyists
why else
and
would you get
donors.
trade?
They are
Money.
not there serving the people
No, I
that
realize
they
that,
are
but I mean,
electing. Because
but the
cinema
fact of the matter
lies
is,
through her teeth.
we have to get more senators in order to nullify them
That's
because I don't
right.
think they're going anywhere.
And
So
this is what I have been praying for. This is what I've been advocating. I've been believing, like, if we can get at 3 or 4 more
yeah,
senators,
we need 11. But I mean, yes, I'll take 3 or 4.
that
But
I
the
would be
fact
able
of the
to.
matter is, people cannot afford. There are two things I don't think people can afford to do. Number one is vote Republican for any reason,
Right, for any
anybody,
reason
for
whatsoever.
anyone, because they are voting as a block. They are acting as. I'm sure there are good Republicans. I'm sure there are wonderful people that call themselves Republican and have an R behind their name. But as long as they are going to walk in lockstep and vote with Trump and all of those people that are taking us down the path, the end democracy, I can't have any of them in any role, in anywhere. And so that's my number one message is and I've never in my life been so partisan, but there has
Oh,
never
me
been such
either.
a choice between democracy and where the hell they're going, which is, I don't even know, but it is not anything looking like the democracy which we've spent our lives fighting for. So
Everything we have here was bought by blood. And I keep impressing upon young people that we have to listen to you too, because the future is yours. What happens now is impacting your future.
Well, for sure, because they won't have one.
You
And
won't
like I said,
have
this
one at all.
democracy is not going to be, it's not like it can be regained. It's like, do you see how quickly since, the last, it really starting with Obama. It's been going
Oh
downhill
yes.
since then, and certainly no fault to him. But that's when things became so polarized, and they were trying so hard to stop him that
To
they
stop
stopped the American
him.
government.
I
And
mean,
then came
Georgia
Trump.
even joined in that ridiculous birther.
Well, I know, like I'm saying, so that kind of nonsense. But I just, like I don't have the energy because I just find this depressing.
It
So
is, and we
really,
won't go there because we've had a lovely time, and I'll get together with you to introduce you to my pastor, but also I'd love to have you come back. And any of you ladies that think that this might be, I don't know where everyone is located, but any of you that think that after you go to the website, look at the Witness Stones Project, any of you that think that this would benefit your church or your school, we are trying to impact the lives of young people, and in the process, our lives are impacted. I would never have known that 5 to 10,000 Black men fought in the Revolutionary.
war.
I'm sorry, Electra, we're not going to stay on that subject. You guys are depressing me. How do you think we feel? Shit. We're not going to continue on the topic. We've decided to squash it. If you think that if you think this program will benefit anyone in your community, by all means, check out the website. There is just so much wonderful information about the project, the history, what they desire to do, what they are presenting. It's it's very beautifully structured. So by all means, check it out. And so I'm going to thank all of you, Electra, Cardamasi, Jaconda. Let's see who else was in the chat tonight. Jaconda, you are a faithful soldier. You and Cardamasi Mesquite, Electra Storm, Edwina Stevens. We had a new person come in whose name I'd never seen. Usually, Pat, I would pull some oracle cards or a 3-card reading. This just wasn't the kind of night for that. What was the Spirit Knows Tarot? Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope it won't be the last time. I'm going to bid you all a good night. Pat, you stay with me. I want to thank you all for coming. Don't forget to turn on your notification bell, because you know me. I never know when I'm going to pop up with a bright idea or just wanting to chat or something actually very interesting like tonight. So thank you for joining us. And we are voting blue. I voted yesterday. Thank you, Pat. They're thanking you for coming.
Oh, absolutely.
And so we'll have her back, and we'll have her back very soon. Good night, everyone. Thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for your attention.